It was late June 2006, the kind of summer where every mile of asphalt shimmered with heat and endless possibility. For three high school seniors from northern Arizona, Mara Delaney, Imani Brooks, and Leah Sutter, it was supposed to be the road trip they'd talk about for years. A post-graduation rite of passage before college scattered them across the country. They had planned it for months, a loop through the Southwest, Zion, Bryce Canyon, Grand Staircase, then a couple nights of camping near an old state park on the Utah-Arizona border. Nothing fancy, just the three of them, a borrowed 1999 Toyota Camry, 2 disposable cameras, and a cooler full of snacks. No GPS, no smartphones, just old-school MapQuest printouts and road signs. They left home on a Thursday morning, waving goodbye to parents who reminded them to check in at every stop. They did, at first. A call from a gas station in Page, a photo taken with a mule deer near a rest area. But then, silence. On Saturday, June 17, 2006, the girls entered Crescent Ridge Preserve, a rugged but beautiful stretch of trail system known for its red sandstone cliffs and high desert flora. They were supposed to spend one night there, pitch a tent, cook dinner on a small propane stove, and leave early the next morning. They never checked out. A ranger doing rounds the next day noticed their car still parked at the trailhead, untouched. At first, it didn't raise alarms. Maybe they'd extended the hike or camped deeper than planned. But by Sunday afternoon, when the car still sat undisturbed, dusty, and locked, someone called it in. By Monday morning, a search had begun. Their campsite was found, untouched, tent still zipped, sleeping bags inside, cooler still packed, campfire ashes cold. The girls' backpacks were gone, but their wallets, cell phones, and keys had been left behind. There were no signs of a struggle, and no blood, no broken branches, no notes, no witnesses. Just absence, the most haunting kind. The community back home in Flagstaff erupted into action. Flyers, vigils, news vans, interviews with tearful parents and confused classmates. The sheriff's department launched a full-scale search, combing miles of trail, caves, and ravines with dogs, helicopters, and volunteers. Nothing. The only possible clue came from a hiker who said he passed 3 girls late that Saturday, around 4 p.m. He couldn't remember their faces, but noted one of them wore a purple windbreaker and had a walking stick. That matched Leah's outfit. He said they were arguing quietly, not in distress, just a little tense. He didn't think much of it. No security cameras existed on the trail. The last confirmed sighting was a blurry photograph taken by Mara on a disposable camera found in the car. It showed Imani and Leah smiling near a cliff's edge, time-stamped just past noon on the 17th. After that, the trail, figuratively and literally, went cold. In the weeks that followed, theories spun wildly. They got lost, but they were experienced hikers. They ran away, but why leave behind IDs and cash? They were abducted, but by whom and how in such an open, empty place? By July, the media attention had faded. By September, the flyers had curled and yellowed on light poles. By Christmas, it was a cold case. But for the families, it was a wound that refused to scab. Mara's mother refused to sell her daughter's car, which stayed parked in the driveway, washed every Sunday. Leah's father visited the preserve once a year on the exact date of her disappearance, hiking the trail alone in silence, and Imani's sister started a blog, Where Are They Now?, which chronicled every false lead, every dead-end tip, every whispered rumor. There was one local man who remained convinced something had been missed. Ranger Dennis Keene, now retired, was the one who had found the abandoned car back in 2006. He said something had always felt off about the site. Too clean, too perfect. Like someone had reset the scene. It was as if they vanished mid-step, he told a podcast in 2014. 3 young women don't just disappear without something or someone covering their tracks. But the case stayed cold for 15 long years. Then, in 2021, something surfaced. On a dusty spring morning, a new ranger, Nora Whitlow, was doing routine maintenance near a closed service trail, one that had been decommissioned in 2005 due to erosion and bear activity. It was overgrown now, rarely accessed. She noticed something strange just off the main path, a patch of disturbed earth surrounded by brittle rocks and old roots. It looked recent, even though no crews had been there in years. She bent down, brushed the dirt away, and found a metal tin. Inside it, a half-crushed, disposable camera, film still sealed, just barely intact. There were initials carved inside the lid of the tin, MD, Mara Delaney. A chill swept over the ranger as she radioed for backup, because if the camera had survived, what about what was on it? The film is developed. Among the blurry shots is one image that should not exist, a photograph of the girls, time-stamped a full day after they were presumed missing. They are not on the trail. They are inside a wooden room, a cabin maybe, smiling nervously. Someone else is holding the camera. And whoever it was, they were never part of the original investigation. The photo was grainy, the kind of half-blurred, low-resolution image only a disposable camera from 2006 could produce, and yet it was enough to jolt the cold case wide open. In the center of the frame stood Mara, Imani, and Leah, each looking older than they should have, or perhaps just more fragile, not fresh-faced like they were in the other trail photos. Their clothes were wrinkled. Imani clutched her sleeve tightly. Leah's face was tense. Mara's eyes, the only ones low, oaking straight into the lens, carried a mixture of dread and forced composure. They were not in the woods, they were in a room. Wooden walls, no windows, one flickering bulb above, a curtain, thin, cheap, drawn across something behind them, a folding chair in the corner. A box fan stood near the wall, pointing upward. No one else in the frame, but someone was clearly holding the camera, and that someone had managed to remain invisible for 15 years. The timestamp at the bottom, June 18, 2006, 5:41 p.m., almost 30 hours after they'd supposedly vanished. The image stunned investigators. Deputy Sheriff Aaron Malloy, who had just joined the reopened unit for unresolved rural disappearances, said the moment the image came through, the entire department went silent. You could hear a pin drop. Everyone just froze. Because that one photo changed everything. They were alive after the point they were declared missing. They had been inside somewhere. That meant someone took them, or lured them, or hid them. And someone might still know the truth. The forensic team re-examined the tin it came in, a rusted, dented Altoid-style container wrapped in plastic and stuffed with dry moss. Someone had intentionally tried to preserve it. It wasn't a lost item. It was planted. That's what haunted Ranger Nora Whitlow most. It wasn't just buried, she said in an internal memo. It was meant to be found, but not too soon. The location where it was found was over 2 miles from the girls' original campsite, just off the old service trail that had been closed due to landslides. It was never part of the initial search perimeter. Why? Because back in 2006, that trail had been omitted from the official topographical search maps due to weather risks. The Forestry Service had flagged it as unstable terrain, but that detail hadn't been widely publicized, and most of the volunteers searching back then didn't even know the trail existed. So whoever buried the camera there knew the land very well. Investigators dove back into files, seeking anyone with knowledge of the preserve's off-grid trails and terrain in 2006. Rangers, contractors, and forestry workers were cross-referenced with old arrest records, hunting permits, and maintenance logs. That's when a name surfaced. Roger Kessler, a private contractor who worked with the Forestry Service from 2003 to 2006. He'd helped reroute trails during the seasonal floodplain repairs. His last known assignment? Working on the exact area where the camera was found. He left the contract abruptly 3 weeks after the girls went missing. No formal reason filed. Worse, he'd lived in a trailer less than 5 miles from the preserve. But by the time authorities tracked the lead, Kessler was already dead. He'd passed away in 2014 from a heart condition. That could have been the end of the trail again. But then, something else surfaced. A missing maintenance report, filed in July 2006 by Kessler's supervisor, had never been entered into the digital system. It was handwritten, misfiled, and only rediscovered during a full archive scan. It read, RK reported unusual damage to fencing near service trail. Said someone's been through here. Also noted old shed off the creek bend had a broken latch. Told him to reinforce and let it be. Not priority. An old shed. No mention of it in police records, no photos, no coordinates. The search team returned to the area, led by drone and topographic mapping, and after 3 days of searching off-path, tucked in behind a grove of scrub oak and washed-out gravel, they found it. A rotting wooden shed, barely standing. Inside, scattered fragments, a melted battery-powered lantern, old instant noodle wrappers, duct tape, an overturned plastic chair, and beneath a warped floorboard, the corner of a torn notebook page. Just one legible line. We counted 3 nights. He said if we kept quiet, we'd go home. The ink wonku. As faded, the edge singed, but the implication was chilling. 3 girls, 3 nights. They were held there. Then, nothing. Investigators theorized that the girls may have been held in the shed temporarily, then moved. Perhaps the perpetrator got scared or planned to return, but the condition of the shed and its contents suggested abandonment and haste. Forensic teams scoured the site. DNA was limited, too degraded, but one fragment matched a partial from Mara's toothbrush, confirming her presence. Still, it raised more questions than answers. Why only one photo? Why bury it 15 years later? Was it guilt or a game? Back in Flagstaff, the families held a joint press conference, the first in a decade. Leah's mother, choking back tears, said, "We asked every year, begged for answers. We were told they probably ran away, that they might be gone. But they weren't. Someone had them. Someone lied." The FBI joined the case officially within a week. Cliffhanger. 3 days after the shed discovery, a forest ranger, while scanning the dry creek bed near the park boundary, stumbled across a stack of animal bones, and beneath them something that didn't belong. A small silver bracelet engraved with the initials I.B. Imani Brooks. It had been hidden, deliberately buried beneath a pile of deer bones. And nearby, footprints, fresh, human, less than 24 hours old. Someone was watching, still watching. The bracelet, small, silver, tarnished with time, was unmistakably Imani's. Her mother confirmed it almost instantly from photographs. It had been a birthday gift, engraved with her initials, I.B. Imani never took it off. But it was where it had been found that unsettled everyone. Hidden beneath a stack of cleaned deer bones, like someone had intentionally buried it there, masked by nature's decay, almost like a warning or a marker. The discovery reignited the case with full force. The area around the creek was cordoned off. Cadaver dogs were flown in. Drones scanned the tree line. But the most disturbing clue wasn't the bracelet itself. It was the footprints. Fresh, clear, human. Whoever left them had been there within 24 hours of the ranger's sweep. Who comes back to a site like that after 15 years? And why? Detective Aaron Malloy, now heading the joint state and FBI investigation, quietly reviewed every old interview from 2006, especially those conducted in the first 72 hours, when panic blurred details and routine statements were often dismissed. One name stood out: Brandon Keir. He'd been a seasonal volunteer with the park's wildlife tagging program in 2006. A local from the nearby town of Sycamore Ridge, just 12 miles from the girls' last known location. According to the logs, Brandon had logged in and out of the wildlife station the day after the girls disappeared. The reason he was never considered a suspect? He'd claimed he was out tagging deer and had GPS data to support it. But in 2021, that GPS record was missing, lost in a file system update, according to the ranger station. And when authorities tried to track Brandon down for a follow-up, they learned he'd changed his name in 2010 after moving to Idaho. His new name, Grant Keller, and he lived just 2 hours from the location where the bracelet was found. The FBI secured a search warrant and approached Grant Keller's small home in a quiet Idaho suburb. The front yard was tidy. Garden gnomes, wind chimes, a hummingbird feeder. Inside, It was normal, almost painfully normal. But in the garage, tucked behind dusty boxes of tools and paint cans, agents found something odd, a sealed plastic storage bin, locked. Inside were old maps of the Wilderness Preserve from 2006, including hand-drawn trails not listed on official maps. There were 3 missing persons flyers, each laminated and folded neatly, and at the bottom, a journal. It wasn't written by him. It was Mara's. There were only 4 pages that hadn't disintegrated, or faded completely, but those 4 pages changed everything. He brought us food the first night, told us to stay quiet, told us no one would believe us if we ran. We waited for help, but it didn't come. Leah thinks we're in a shed near the creek. Imani doesn't sleep. She keeps humming that same tune. I think it calms her. We saw his face today. He's not just a ranger. He was in the visitor center before. I remember him now. If someone finds this, please tell my mom I tried to protect them. Handwriting analysis confirmed it. It was Mara's. And just like that, Brandon Keir, now Grant Keller, became the prime suspect. Authorities interrogated him for hours. At first he denied everything. He said he kept the items from an old box someone had left behind at a ranger station, that he was obsessed with the case and had followed it for years. He even claimed he buried the bracelet to honor them, not to hide evidence. But when they showed him the journal, his composure cracked. "You weren't supposed to find that shed," he mumbled. When asked what happened to the girls, he went silent. A moment later he whispered, "I only saw one of them leave." That statement alone shifted the investigation. Leave? Which girl? Was she still alive? Brandon or Grant refused to say more. But the FBI now believed at least one of the girls had escaped whatever happened in those days after June 17, 2006. Now the question was, which one? In a desperate move, detectives returned to every old case file, every anonymous tip, every sighting report that had once been dismissed or deemed low priority. That's when they found it. A 2009 security footage still from a gas station outside Yakima, Washington. A woman, mid-20s, wearing a faded red hoodie, entered the store barefoot. She bought crackers and juice. She didn't speak, paid in cash, then vanished before Paulie. ICE arrived. The attendant had filed a vague incident report, but the footage was grainy. The woman looked like Leah. But it wasn't enough to confirm identity. No fingerprints. No follow-up sighting. Still, the team was convinced. Someone had survived, and perhaps they were still out there, hiding, watching, waiting for the past to stay buried. But it wouldn't. Cliffhanger. Back at the park, a fresh clue surfaced. While rescanning the shed site, ground-penetrating radar uncovered a second compartment beneath the floorboards, one that had been intentionally sealed with concrete. As they chipped it open, the team braced themselves. Inside, a plastic container, and inside that, a VHS tape. It was labeled in faded marker, Day 3. The plastic case was damp and clouded with mold. It had no markings beyond a scrawled, fading note in black ink. Day 3. It wasn't just out of place, it was unnerving. Tapes don't survive well underground, but this one, for some reason, had. The investigators were cautious. The container was sealed, but the VHS inside, once cleaned and stabilized, was intact enough to be played. A special lab prepared it. Everyone in the room that day remembers the moment the grainy black and white footage flickered onto the monitor. No one spoke for over 6 minutes, because the girls, Leah, Mara, and Imani, were alive on that tape. The timestamp read, June 20th, 2006, 03:13 a.m. The footage was static at first, then settled. The camera appeared hidden, mounted high in the corner of a wooden interior, a shed, maybe a cabin. The space was small with a single cot, a thin mattress on the floor, a rusted bucket, and scraps of food in the corner. The camera zoomed in. 3 girls, huddled. Mara sat against the wall, rocking slightly, holding Imani's hand. Leah paced slowly, barefoot, hugging her arms. Their clothes were dirtied, hair tangled, but they were alive and clearly terrified. "I think he's watching," Leah whispered. "I heard him come in earlier. He's out there." The camera zoomed back slightly. Sugji's cheat. Asking someone behind the lens was manipulating it remotely. "We have to leave tonight," Mara said. "He said he's coming in the morning." The footage ran for 13 minutes. No one entered. No one spoke again. But in the final frame, as the tape sputtered out, the girls all turned, simultaneously, toward the door. Not from sound. It was instinct, like they felt something. Then the screen went black. Investigators froze the footage, analyzed every frame. Based on the shadows and the grain of the walls, the FBI was able to confirm the location, an abandoned service shack deep within the east section of the national park. It had long been closed off after flooding in 1998, and no one had ever searched it. A team moved in fast, following the topography from the video. Less than 72 hours later, they reached the site. Overgrown, mossy, nearly collapsed. But it matched the footage exactly. Inside the service shack, they found scratch marks on the wooden floor near the door. 4 tally marks carved into the wall. A pair of size 7 sneakers tucked under the rotten cot. And in the dirt behind the shack, wrapped in torn rain tarp, were more fragments. A tattered journal page with water damage, only a few lines visible. Imani kept whispering prayers. She said she dreamed of light. Mara's nose bled again. Said it's from the mold. A Polaroid photo, half burnt. It showed 2 girls sitting near a fire in the woods. One face was blurred from flame exposure, but the other was clear. It was Leah. She was smiling. That image shifted the investigation again. This wasn't just captivity. They had survived beyond that shack, possibly weeks longer. They had been moved or had escaped, but at some point they were still together. And someone had a camera, which brought the FBI back to Grant Keller, formerly Brandon Keir. He was now in custody, but he remained largely silent. When shown the VHS footage, he sat frozen for several minutes, then muttered, "That wasn't supposed to exist." When pressed, he claimed, "They weren't all supposed to go, just one. I didn't even have a plan. The others, I didn't hurt them, I swear, I only watched." He wouldn't clarify what he meant by only watched. But a new theory emerged, and it was darker than before. Grant wasn't alone. The tape had a security watermark in the bottom corner, TS-07. That wasn't standard. Forensic teams traced it to a discontinued brand of remote trail cameras used primarily by private security firms and paramilitary outfitters, not park rangers. Only one known distributor sold that model in 2006. And records showed that one unit had been purchased that year by a now defunct company under the name Harlan M. Cray. The same name appeared once in the original 2006 Ranger logs. A man who signed in briefly at a fire tower on June 18th, the day after the girls vanished. He listed his reason as independent trail mapping. He was never contacted again, and now he was gone. Cliffhanger ending of Part 4. Authorities released the Polaroid to the media, pixelated for privacy, asking the public for leads. It aired nationwide. Local stations, cold case forums, even Reddit. The next day, they received an envelope. No return address. Inside was a second Polaroid, this one recent. It showed a hand, pale, female, reaching toward a window. Taped on the window pane, a folded piece of paper, written in shaky block letters, "I am not alone." The second Polaroid sent the investigation into overdrive. It was dated February 2021, the ink still fresh on the photo's back. The image, a pale hand reaching toward a fogged-over window. Taped to the glass, a paper that read, "I am not alone." No face, no location, just that haunting phrase. And the handwriting, when compared to notes recovered from the abandoned shack, matched Mara Patel almost perfectly. After 15 years, could one of the girls still be alive? The FBI's forensic analysts got to work immediately. They focused on the background, window frame style, the paint chipping, the smudged reflection in the glass. A faint outline in the top left corner revealed part of a fire escape, possibly urban, maybe industrial. That ruled out a forest cabin or remote woodland home. The moisture patterns on the glass, consistent with basement-level windows or small apartment flats with poor insulation. They narrowed it to buildings common in older Midwestern cities, Cleveland, Detroit, and parts of Pittsburgh. More importantly, the type of film used in the Polaroid had only been reissued for sale online in 2020 by a boutique analog company based in Colorado. That meant whoever took the photo had access to the internet, knew how to buy specialty film, and knew exactly what they were doing. This wasn't a random cry for help. It was a message. Meanwhile, Grant Keller, formerly Brandon Keir, remained in holding, growing increasingly agitated. Detectives played the second photo on a screen in front of him. His reaction was subtle. No outburst, no denial, just a twitch in his jaw and the quiet statement, "She made it farther than I thought." When asked what that meant, he gave a chilling response. "I wasn't the one keeping her after they left the shack. There was someone else. They called him the custodian. I never met him, just heard the name." Investigators cross-referenced the alias, digging through all known reports, incident logs, and regional tips. No one by that name had ever been arrested. No fingerprints, no sightings. But then, a retired ranger from 2006, who had worked along the northern trailheads near Michigan's Upper Peninsula, came forward with something strange. Back in July of 2006, a month after the girls vanished, he responded to a complaint from hikers who said they'd seen a girl walking barefoot along a utility road near He closed lumber mill by the Black River. She looked young, disoriented, but when they called out, she ran. The ranger drove up to check, found nothing, but did find an old janitor's cart, rusting near the tree line. It was empty, except for a small school notebook with Leah scribbled repeatedly on the inside cover. At the time, it didn't raise flags. The girl's case had already gone cold, and the sighting was chalked up to imagination. Now, it looked like Leah may have escaped once, but hadn't made it far. And someone, possibly the custodian, had brought her back. With every new lead, the pattern became more disturbing. First the trail shack, then the lumber mill. Now, the Polaroid window, possibly in a city basement. 3 different environments, 3 different timelines, but always the same victims. It was like someone was moving them, hiding them just long enough to erase all traces before starting over again. Back in the present, a breakthrough came in the most unexpected form. A real estate manager in Toledo, Ohio, recognized the window frame from the public release of the second Polaroid. It matched several units in an old apartment block she oversaw. Buildings originally constructed in the 1940s, now used as low-income transitional housing. She remembered something else, too. About a year ago, one tenant had called to complain about creepy noises coming from the basement laundry unit, humming, scratching, and what sounded like whispering at night. She thought it was rats. But when the manager visited with maintenance, the laundry door was padlocked from the inside. They knocked. No one answered. Eventually, the tenant moved out. The noise stopped. No further action was taken. Now, detectives had probable cause. Within 24 hours, they had a search warrant and descended on the property with a full forensics team. The basement unit was sealed tight, reinforced with old wood and black plastic nailed over the inside windows. A musty, chemical-heavy smell hit them first. Inside, it wasn't just a laundry room, it was a converted living space. A small cot, a working toilet attached to a plastic tank, dozens of books, a mirror covered in black paint, and on the far side, a Polaroid camera with film still loaded. The taped message, "I am not alone," was found stuck inside a small vent cover, but no one was there. Whoever had lived in that basement had left days, maybe hours ago. They had been watching the media too, and fled. But they left behind something more chilling than anyone expected. A stack of papers taped to the wall. One page, torn and taped in the center, read, "He changes his face, he changes his name, but he always comes back for the ones who got away." Cliffhanger ending for Part 5. The final item found was a scrap of clothing shoved behind a broken dryer panel, a strip of a cotton sleeve, hand-stitched initials faintly visible, M.P. Mara Patel. The FBI wasn't chasing ghosts anymore. They were chasing a man who had spent 15 years hiding in plain sight, changing his identity, and possibly still holding at least one of the girls. And this time, the trail was fresh. The discovery of the basement apartment in Toledo cracked open a truth darker than anyone had anticipated. Whoever had been keeping Mara Patel alive had done so methodically, long-term, underground, and far away from the public eye. The trail led to a new suspect, the faceless figure known only as the Custodian. The name itself had first surfaced from Grant Keller's interrogation, a vague reference, spoken like a memory you try not to remember. But now it felt less like a boogeyman and more like a man who had been just out of reach for 15 years. The evidence in the Toledo basement was now undergoing forensic review, hair samples, fingerprints. But the Polaroid camera yielded one small miracle. Tucked inside the backing was a photo-negative strip containing 3 exposures never printed. The photos were grainy, black and white, and partially damaged, but one of them showed a young woman with matted hair sitting cross-legged on the floor, reading a book. In the corner of the frame, someone had written a date, October 2014. It was Mara, unmistakably older, maybe 24 or 25, but alive, and someone had been photographing her for years. While investigators dug into the photo evidence, Deputy Craig Monroe, now reactivated as a cold case consultant, started building a profile. He believed the Custodian wasn't random. This isn't just a predator. This is someone who thinks he's protecting them. The name itself implied a twisted sense of duty. Not captor, not killer, but caretaker. With the team's profiler, Monroe began reviewing disappearances and patterns in the Midwest between 2005 and 2020. They looked for men in caretaking roles, janitors, church groundskeepers, building superintendents. Anyone with access to underground spaces, keys, privacy, and time. A narrowed list of 23 names emerged, among them a man named Walter Finch. Walter Finch had worked as a maintenance worker in 3 different states, Michigan, Ohio, and Indiana. In 2006, the same summer the girls vanished, he had been working for a short-term forestry cleanup crew along Highway 6, exactly where the girls' abandoned car had been found. He left the job abruptly in August. From 2008 to 2016, Walter worked as the nighttime janitor for a religious boarding school in northern Ohio. It had been shut down for code violations, including reports of a locked basement wing no staff ever had access to. And in 2017, Finch applied for a new job, maintenance supervisor for the apartment complex in Toledo where Mara's basement room was found. There was no photo on file, no online footprint. But Monroe dug deeper. Using DMV records and archived job applications, they found a 2005 ID photo. And when they showed it to Grant Keller, he stiffened. Yeah, that's him. He was older than me, always quiet, called himself a guardian, creeped me out. Now, they had a name, a face, and a chilling theory. Walter Finch may have taken Mara after she escaped Grant. He may have even rescued her in his own twisted way. But it was unclear whether she had been held or had begun to believe in him. Back in Toledo, a set of partially burned letters were recovered behind the water heater. Some were illegible, but one fragment stood out. It was in Mara's handwriting. He says the world forgot us. He says if I step outside, they'll kill me. I don't know anymore if he's lying or right. I just know. I'm tired of hiding. And beneath that, he talks about the other girl, the quiet one. He says she still listens. That changed everything, because the only girl ever described as quiet in the early interviews was Leah. This prompted investigators to expand the search area around Toledo, looking for any other buildings Walter Finch had worked in or had access to. One of them was an abandoned train depot 15 miles west of the city. A local urban explorer had once uploaded a grainy YouTube video of the interior showing scattered mattresses and strange graffiti. In the background, barely visible, was what looked like a braided bracelet hanging from a nail. Rachel James had made bracelets like that. Her mother had testified to it during one of the first vigils. A new team swept the train depot. They found no bodies, but they did recover 3 Polaroid negatives, a child's sketchbook with the name Leah written on the cover, a hand-drawn map of underground access tunnels connected to the city's old sewer system. Leah's name had resurfaced again. And now, there was another place Walter may have used, a system of forgotten tunnels, unseen by anyone for decades. Then came the most disturbing break. A local librarian reported that in 2020, a man matching Finch's description had regularly borrowed books on identity suppressi, on survivalist shelters, and urban concealment. But more chilling was the title of the last book he requested, How to Forget Who You Were. He never returned it. As the task force planned their next move, Monroe felt the familiar itch of dread creeping up his spine. This man hadn't just stolen 3 girls. He had built a belief system, a ritual, and maybe even a purpose around them. Each girl had likely been told the others were gone. They had been isolated, reprogrammed, and possibly left to believe the world outside was a threat. Mara may have escaped, yes. But what if Leah didn't want to be found? What if she was still underground, waiting, or worse, helping him? At 2:47 a.m., Monroe received an encrypted email. No sender, no traceable address. Attached was a single recent image, time-stamped just 2 weeks prior. It showed a girl sitting at a table, dimly lit, her hair tucked behind her ears. The image file name? Quiet One JPG? She looked straight into the camera, expressionless, but her bracelet, identical to Leah's, and pinned to the wall behind her was a sheet of paper. Not all of us want to come back. The image titled Quiet One JPG had shaken everyone in the investigation to the core. It wasn't just Leah's face. Though unmistakably older now, the braided bracelet on her wrist and the faint scar on her temple confirmed it was her. It was the message behind her that froze Detective Monroe in place. Not all of us want to come back. There were only 2 ways to interpret that line. 1, Leah had been brainwashed into believing that her life underground, in hiding, was safer than the world above. Or 2, she had become complicit, perhaps even protective of the man who had kept her there. Either way, Monroe knew they were running out of time. A task force was formed within 24 hours. The tunnels shown on the old hand-drawn map recovered from the train depot were cross-referenced with historical blueprints from the city's infrastructure archives. It was clear. Much of Toledo's abandoned sewer system hadn't been accessed in decades. Sections had collapsed. Others had been sealed off during upgrades in the 1980s and 90s. But one segment, leading east from the depot to a cluster of condemned service buildings, was still structurally intact. The theory was chilling. Walter Finch may have turned these tunnels into an underground network of captivity, with each location holding 1 girl at different times. Maybe they were moved. Maybe they weren't even aware of each other after the first year. That was the cruelest part. Isolation as a strategy. On the morning of October 9, 2021, Monroe led a team of 6 into the tunnel system. Accompanying them were forensic pathologists, thermal imaging units, and 2 canine handlers. The air grew colder the deeper they went. Moisture clung to the walls. There was no light except what they brought. At exactly 3:13 p.m., one of the dogs started barking. A narrow concrete passage veered left, blocked by a rusted steel grate. Behind it they found an old cot, a stack of food cans, and Polaroids glued to the wall in a grid, all faces of the same 3 girls. But only one space was empty. That was the most haunting part. Someone had removed one of the photos. Further in, they reached a makeshift wooden door fashioned from shipping pallets and reinforced with nails. Behind it was a chamber. A room roughly 12 feet wide, low-ceilinged, lined with personal items, a child's jacket, a coloring book, an old battery-operated radio. On the far side of the room stood a mirror, its surface foggy with condensation, and in the center of the mirror, written in marker, "I'm not who she remembers." That sentence, likely written by Leah, set off a psychological alarm in Monroe's head. It was what cult victims often said about themselves, that their past selves had been erased, rewritten, Not kidnapped, not stolen, transformed. Rustling sound echoed from deeper down the tunnel. The team froze. Voices were too risky. They moved silently, tracking the sound toward a second chamber. This one was more primitive. Dirt walls, a cot built from crates and blankets, a makeshift bookshelf made from cinder blocks, and beside it, a woman. She was barefoot, thin, and wore a gray hoodie. Her hair was braided, falling loosely down her back. She looked up with startling calm when they entered. "You're too late," she said softly. The woman identified herself as Leah, though no confirmation was needed. Her fingerprints, dental records, and even her scar matched the file. She didn't resist. She didn't cry. She just kept saying the same thing. "I told you, I didn't want to be found." When they asked about Walter Finch, she shook her head. "He's not here anymore," she whispered. "He left when the others were gone. I stayed. I kept the rules. I stayed where it was safe." Back at headquarters, Leah underwent psychological evaluation. Trauma markers were everywhere: memory gaps, dissociative behaviors, complex PTSD. But what disturbed experts most was her belief that the outside world had failed them. "We begged for help. You all gave up. He didn't." Meanwhile, Monroe began piecing together Leah's timeline. She had lived underground for nearly 15 years. She confirmed she saw Mara once, in the early days, but said they were separated quickly. As for Rachel, "I think she got out, but I don't think she made it far." Monroe's chest tightened. Rachel James was the only girl unaccounted for, and if Leah's fragmented memory was right, that meant she had escaped the tunnels at some point, but never resurfaced. One last lead remained. Leah told them Finch had an old hiding place outside the city. She never saw it, but he talked about it. A cabin, hidden deep in the woods, where time didn't matter. Satellite scans and old land records turned up a remote property 50 miles west of Toledo. It had been purchased in 1996 by a shell company, never taxed, never visited. A final search team, Biodiopao, as dispatched. What they found was a rotting wooden structure, nearly swallowed by trees. Inside, only traces of human presence remained. But in the basement, beneath a plywood board, they discovered a wooden box. Inside the box, a braid of dark hair tied with blue thread, a pressed corsage from a 2006 high school prom, a VHS tape labeled "She Stayed With Me." Monroe inserted the tape at headquarters. Grainy footage appeared, a girl slumped in a chair, humming softly to herself. The voice behind the camera said, "She chose to stay. That's love, isn't it?" Cliffhanger ending of Part 7. As the screen faded to static, Monroe stood motionless. This wasn't over. Rachel's story had never ended, and somewhere someone still believed she chose to vanish. But Monroe knew better. "Nobody chooses this," he whispered. The cabin in the woods was sealed and declared a crime scene. Forensics swept every corner. Soil beneath the basement was tested, scanned, and sampled. No body was found. But it didn't matter. They now knew the truth. Rachel James never made it out alive. What remained was the story of what happened, or at least the fragments left behind. The VHS tape discovered in the basement would become the most haunting piece of evidence in the entire case. Experts worked for weeks to digitally stabilize and enhance the footage. When finally revealed in full, it showed a timeline of months. Rachel sitting in different clothes in different corners of that same room. In one clip, she's older, maybe 18 or 19, and whispering to someone off camera, "If anyone sees this, tell my mom I waited. I waited every night." Those few seconds shattered the community's collective heart. For over a decade, Rachel had survived, but help never came. Leah's recovery. Leah, the only surviving girl, was relocated to a secure trauma rehabilitation center out of state, and her recovery would not be simple. She barely spoke in her first month, except to the night nurses to whom she sometimes asked strange questions. Do people still drive the same way? Are pictures still paper? She'd been frozen in time, psychologically sealed in 2006. The world had changed without her. Social media, smartphones, streaming, all alien. But the trauma hadn't changed, and neither had the guilt. She often asked about Rachel and whether anyone had remembered her. Detective Monroe visited her weekly. It wasn't part of his job anymore, but something in Leah's quiet presence kept calling him back. During one visit, Leah finally asked, "Why did no one look after the first year?" Monroe, eyes tired and red, could only answer, "They thought you ran away, but some of us never stopped checking." The town responds. News of the case spread nationally. Documentaries, podcasts, and news outlets swarmed Ohio. The headlines were everywhere. Underground captivity case, a 15-year disappearance solved. 3 girls lost, and only 1 came back. They were beneath us the whole time. The town of Perrysburg, just outside Toledo, became an unwilling symbol. Locals held vigils for Rachel and Mara, building makeshift shrines outside the high school. Rachel's mother, who had moved to Chicago years earlier, returned quietly to attend the memorial. She asked to speak during the candlelight vigil. Standing under dim street lamps, her voice cracked as she said, "For 15 years I thought she left, but she never stopped trying to come home, and I will never forgive myself for believing otherwise." Mara's legacy. Mara's body had been recovered in 2013 but without context. Now, with Leah's testimony and new forensic timelines, authorities could confirm what they had long suspected. Mara had been the first to die. In a chilling revelation, Monroe discovered that Finch kept journal entries in a separate storage unit tied to a different alias. Notes were disjointed, fragmented, but one entry stood out. She fought like wildfire, but she wouldn't. "Forget the others. I told her not to speak their names." That one note haunted Monroe. Mara's defiance had cost her life, but likely gave Leah time to survive. A plaque was installed in the local park with all 3 names engraved. In memory of Mara, Rachel, and Leah, who never stopped being found, even when no one was looking. Walter Finch, the final loose thread. Despite everything, Walter Finch was never officially found. Interpol and U.S. Marshals now considered him a domestic terrorist-level fugitive due to the depth of planning and psychological warfare uncovered. A few reported sightings emerged, Montana, Oregon, even Ontario, but none were confirmed. Some speculated he had changed his identity, his face, his story. Others believed he was long dead. But Monroe had a different theory. Men like him don't die quietly. They want the story to keep going. In his office, Monroe kept one item from the case, the map drawn in crayon found in Leah's journal. It had led them to the tunnel system. It had revealed the hiding place. At the corner of the map, a word had been circled faintly in pencil. Repeat. One last message. 6 months after the investigation closed, Monroe received a package at his office. No return address. Inside was a DVD labeled only "She Chose Light." It contained a single file, a grainy, minute-long video. Leah, seated by a window in the rehab facility, sunlight streaming across her face. She looks directly into the camera and says, "I was taken, but I was never gone. I lived under your streets, behind your schools, beneath your homes, and I screamed. For years I screamed. You didn't hear, but now you do." She pauses. "Remember the ones who didn't come back, and listen for the ones who still might." Final reflection. The case of Leah, Rachel, and Mara didn't just unearth a hidden crime. It exposed a societal fail. The headlines faded. The world moved on. But in Monroe's quiet office, in Leah's journal, and in Rachel's last words on tape, one truth remained clear. Some stories never stop echoing. Because some disappearances are not just mysteries, they are mirrors. And if we don't keep looking, we might not like what they show us.